The rain had started as a gentle whisper against the windshield, a soothing soundtrack for Jenna's late-night drive through the winding backroads of Northern Oregon. She'd rented a secluded cabin for the weekend, hoping the isolation and endless forest would untangle the stress of her job in Portland. When she finally pulled into the gravel driveway of Ashwood Cabin, the rhythmic patter on the roof felt almost hypnotic. The cabin looked quaint and inviting, its porch light casting a warm glow on the surrounding pines. Yet something about the dense, shifting shadows between the trees seemed heavier than just a stormy night. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of cedar and old books. Jenna dropped her overnight bag on the couch, lit the fireplace, and opened a bottle of wine she'd been saving. The rain intensified, turning from a whisper to a soft drumming against the wooden walls. She found herself listening intently, as though the rain carried a subtle melody, one that rose and fell, sometimes almost human in its cadence. Laughing at her own imagination, she settled into an armchair by the fire and let the flickering flames lull her into a sense of peace. Around midnight, a single, deliberate knock echoed from the front door. It wasn't the creak of wood or a branch striking the siding. It was a sharp, measured sound, utterly distinct from the rain. Jenna froze, her glass of wine halfway to her lips. The cabin was miles from the nearest town, and the only neighbor was a closed-up summer home 2 miles down the road. Slowly, she stood, her pulse thudding in her ears, and approached the door. Through the peephole, she saw nothing but darkness and the sheen of rain pooling on the pea. She waited, holding her breath, convinced she had imagined it. But the knock came again, 3 evenly spaced raps, firm but not aggressive. "Hello," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. The rain seemed louder now, masking any distant noises that might give her clues. No reply came, no movement outside, only the persistent sound of water rushing through the gutters. Jenna's hand hovered over the deadbolt, debating whether to open the door, when a third knock rattled the wood, this time closer to the ground, as if someone were crouching. Jenna backed away and grabbed her phone, only to see that there was no signal. She flicked on the porch light again, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was out there, but the bulb flickered and died, plunging the porch into darkness. The only illumination came from the firelight behind her and the dim reflection of rain streaking down the window panes. Somewhere outside, between the rustling trees and the relentless rain, something shifted. The forest had swallowed the sound whole, leaving Jenna staring at the door, a hollow unease settling deep in her chest. The storm outside raged like a living thing, pounding against the shed's walls. Jenna didn't dare move. The knock's echo still vibrated through her chest, and she could almost feel a presence lingering just beyond the thin wooden door. She waited, straining her ears over the drumming rain, but the footsteps didn't return. After what felt like minutes, though it might have been seconds, she slowly reached for the door handle. Her palms were slick, both from rain and sweat, and the poker trembled slightly in her other hand. She eased the door open just an inch. The flashlight revealed a stretch of muddy ground, glistening under the storm. But the footprints were gone, not washed away, simply gone, as though whoever was there had never existed. Lightning briefly illuminated the tree line, but nothing stirred. Her breathing quickened. She backed out of the shed, her boots squelching in the mud, and began edging toward the cabin, her flashlight cutting a narrow cone through the darkness. Halfway back, something caught her eye. On the cabin's porch, just below the front window, a fresh handprint smeared across the glass. The streak glistened in the lightning's flash, unmistakably human and larger than Jenna's own. She stepped closer, her heartbeat hammering. There was something odd about it. The fingers seemed unnaturally long, and the angle suggested whoever had left it was crouched low, peering in. The rain couldn't have created that shape. Whoever had been circling the cabin had watched her from less than a foot away. Jenna bolted inside, slamming and locking the door behind her. She dragged a heavy wooden chair under the handle and another in front of the back door. The poker felt inadequate now, a child's toy against something that could vanish without leaving prints. She glanced at the clock on the mantel, 2:47 a.m. The fire had nearly burned out, plunging the room into a colder darkness. She lit another candle and set it on the windowsill, the flame flickering weakly against the storm's assault. For a fleeting moment, Jenna considered that maybe it wasn't a person at all. The pale face in the trees, the vanishing footprints, the perfectly timed knocks, it all felt calculated, but in a way that didn't fit any ordinary intruder. Her gaze drifted back to the smeared handprint on the porch window. The rain hadn't washed it away yet. As she stared, lightning split the sky once more, and she saw, just for an instant, another handprint appearing on the opposite side of the glass, fingers dragging slowly downward. By the time the thunder followed, the window was empty again. Ethan stood frozen at the window, his breath fogging the glass as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The figure outside hadn't moved, not even a flinch. Just a dark silhouette against the mist, standing perfectly still under the rain. His rational mind tried to take over. Maybe it was a tree stump or a trick of the light. But something about the posture felt too deliberate. The head, slightly cocked to one side. The arms, longer than they should be. And then, faintly through the storm, he heard it. A soft crackle, like a radio signal flickering in and out of tune. He turned back to the soundboard, switching frequencies, trying to trace the interference. The meters flicked wildly, spiking at random intervals. It wasn't static from the storm. It was something transmitting. He flipped another switch, isolating the source. The signal was weak, but there, somewhere just outside the station's range. He pressed the talkback button, heart pounding. "This is WZRD broadcasting on 104.7, he said. "If anyone can hear this, identify yourself." The reply came after a pause, faint, disjointed words buried under layers of static. "You shouldn't have answered." Ethan staggered back from the console, the voice echoing in his head. He turned up the gain, listening closer. Beneath the distortion, there were whispers, many voices, overlapping and fading. His fingers trembled as he reached for the recording button. If this was a hoax, he'd catch it on tape. "Who is this?" he asked, trying to keep his tone steady. The static thickened, and for a brief second, among the noise, he thought he heard his own name whispered. Then, clearer now, "You let him in." "It's too late." Ethan's gaze shot to the window. The figure was gone. He ran to the door, half expecting to find nothing, half terrified he would. The rain had slowed, but the night air still pulsed with energy, the faint buzz of radio interference seeming to vibrate in his bones. He shone his flashlight across the lot, empty. The footprints from before had been washed away, replaced by slick mud and puddles. He turned toward the trees. A faint glow pulsed between the trunks, bluish-white, like a flickering signal light. He blinked, and it vanished. His phone buzzed suddenly in his pocket, making him jump. One new message. Unknown number. The text read, "Don't go back inside." Ethan froze on the spot, rainwater dripping from his hood. A gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying with it what sounded like a voice, low, drawn out, and pleading. "Help me." It came from somewhere near the glow he'd just seen. Against his better judgment, he took a few steps toward the woods. The ground squelched under his boots. "Hello," he called, his flashlight beam cutting through the mist. No answer. Just the sound of the rain returning, heavier now, and that same faint crackle of radio static following him wherever he moved. From the darkness, a branch snapped. Then another. Ethan turned, but before he could react, his flashlight flickered and died. The rain had eased into a mist, but the forest ahead was still thick and black. every sound sharp against the silence that followed. Ethan stood at the edge of the tree line, flashlight useless, the glow of his phone barely cutting through the fog. He told himself it was ridiculous. He should go back inside, call someone, file a report. But the voice still echoed in his head. Help me. It hadn't sounded like a stranger. It had sounded like Marla, his co-host. The thought rooted him in place. She was supposed to be home, sick. What if she wasn't? Ethan stepped into the woods, boots sinking slightly into the wet ground. The radio signal on his handheld receiver, a small emergency unit the station kept by the door, crackled softly as he moved. Each step he took made the signal stronger, like he was walking toward a hidden transmitter. The air smelled faintly metallic, the kind of scent that comes just before lightning. Branches shifted overhead, whispering in the wind. Then came the sound again, closer this time. Ethan, please. The voice was faint but unmistakable. He quickened his pace, pushing through low-hanging branches that clawed at his jacket. The deeper he went, the more wrong the forest felt. The rain didn't seem to reach this far in. The fog glowed faintly, not white but tinted with a strange, cold blue. He passed a cluster of old wooden poles, weathered, cracked, and leaning. They looked like fence posts, but wires dangled between them, the kind used in radio lines decades ago. They led deeper still, into a small clearing. In the center stood a rusted metal tower, no more than 20 feet tall, half collapsed, with an old transmitter box bolted to its base. The screen flickered weakly. He crouched, brushing mud from the casing, revealing faded letters. Property of WZRD 104.7. Field Relay Unit, 1968. The signal had been broadcasting from here. Then, static burst from the handheld radio, loud, jarring, alive. The voice of a woman came through, distorted but urgent. Ethan, you have to leave. They're not. The rest dissolved into white noise. He gripped the radio tight, shouting, Marla, where are you? Silence. Then the static shifted, low and rhythmic, almost like breathing. Behind him, something moved. Leaves rustled. Ethan turned, sweeping the dead flashlight uselessly through the mist. For an instant, he thought he saw a figure standing between two trees, a silhouette with eyes that reflected the faint blue light of the transmitter. He blinked, and it was gone. The radio hissed again, and this time, a voice whispered right beside his ear, You shouldn't have come here. Ethan stumbled backward, tripping over a root and landing hard. The transmitter light flared, bright enough to paint the clearing in harsh blue-white glow. For a split second, he saw shapes moving just beyond the tree line, human-shaped, but wrong. Too tall, limbs too thin, their faces blurred like a photo caught mid-motion. Then, the light died. The forest went black. He scrambled to his feet, fumbling for his phone's flashlight again. Nothing. The battery was dead. Only the static from the handheld remained, now faint and distant. Then, faintly, through the radio, they followed him in. Back at WZRD 104.7, the storm had finally passed, leaving only the soft hum of the generator and the rhythmic drip of water leaking through the roof above Studio B. The on-air light flickered steadily, but the booth was empty. Ethan's mic was still on, recording nothing but the faint hiss of static and the creak of the building. The phone lines had stopped ringing hours ago. The only sign of recent activity was a single coffee mug, still half full, and a jacket slung over the back of the chair. At 3:17 a.m., the side door opened, and Marla stepped inside. Her hair was damp from the mist, her breath visible in the cold air. She frowned when she saw the empty chair. Ethan, her voice echoed through the quiet hallways. No answer. She moved toward the control room, heels clicking softly against the tile. The monitors were still active, the station broadcasting live, but not a single voice came through. Just static, low, rhythmic, and oddly patterned, like breathing through static. She reached for the mic and pressed the talk button. Hey, listeners, this is Marla. Looks like we've had some technical issues tonight. The words felt strange in her mouth. The station didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. She sat at the console, checking the playback logs. The system had been recording continuously, and she could see Ethan's last segment timestamped at 12:49 a.m. She hit play. His voice came through, tense and quiet. If anyone can hear this, identify yourself. Then another voice followed, faint and distorted. Marla froze. It sounded like her. "He's not gone, Ethan. You let him in." The sound made her chest tighten. She didn't remember saying that. She hadn't been at the station since the day before. She replayed it again, listening closer. The distortion thickened with every pass until the voice didn't sound human at all. The audio warped into static, then cut abruptly to silence. The power flickered. For a split second, the monitors went dark and the red "on air" sign blinked out. When they came back, one of the cameras showed something it shouldn't have. The exterior feed, which faced the woods behind the station, displayed a faint, blue-tinted light moving between the trees. Then, movement. A figure crossed the camera's edge. It wasn't Ethan. It was taller. The image glitched and froze on a single frame. The shape standing at the tree lean, its head tilted toward the camera as though listening. Marla's stomach dropped. She tried to switch feeds, but the system lagged, the keys unresponsive. Then, faintly through the speakers, Ethan's voice crackled through, weak, distant, and terrified. "Marla, don't open the door." Before she could react, the side door creaked again. Marla's pulse spiked. She turned, expecting Ethan. The hallway beyond was empty, but the door itself, still swinging gently, was wet. Rainwater pooled beneath it. She took one cautious step toward it, her shoes squeaking softly against the tile. From somewhere near the door came a faint scratching, like fingernails dragging along metal. The on-air light flickered again. Behind her, the mic she'd left open crackled to life on its own. A whisper, breathy and too close, came through the speakers. "You shouldn't have come back." Marla's first instinct was to call for help. Her phone buzzed uselessly, displaying no service. Landlines were down too. The storm had cut the outside connection hours ago. She stared at the security monitors, her reflection warped in their glass. That flickering blue light at the edge of the woods was still there, steady now, almost pulsing in time with the hum of the station's generators. She turned down the studio's speakers and listened carefully. The static on the air wasn't random anymore. It had rhythm, like coded breathing, or Morse, repeating in irregular bursts. Someone, or something, was transmitting. She rewound the night's feed again, her eyes fixed on the waveform dancing across the screen. Beneath Ethan's last words, there was a faint hum, almost imperceptible until she isolated it. When she boosted the frequency, the sound split into layered tones, male and female voices overlapping, whispering phrases she could barely decipher. One of them was hers, unmistakably. "He's in the signal," it said. Her hands trembled. The audio clip was time-stamped 10 minutes after she'd left home earlier that night. She hadn't recorded anything then. She hadn't even been near a microphone that a sudden crash echoed from down the hall. Marla jerked upright, heart hammering. The sound had come from Studio C, the old one they hadn't used in years, the one with the broken transmitter that still powered up on its own sometimes. She grabbed a flashlight from the desk and crept down the corridor. The beam wavered over the faded posters, the peeling wallpaper, the half-open doors. When she reached the old studio, the air felt colder. She pushed the door open slowly. The equipment was powered on. The mic light glowed red, though no one had touched it. On the soundboard, the sliders moved slightly, like invisible fingers adjusting the mix. Then came the voice. Not through her headphones this time, but directly from the speakers in the corner. "Marla," it was Ethan. Weak, breathless, his voice fading in and out of static. "Don't listen to them. The signal, don't follow it." She froze, tears stinging her eyes. "Ethan, where are you?" she whispered. "Are you hurt?" The answer came through in fragments. "The woods, the tower, they're not people. Marla, they sound like us." The static swelled, filling the room with distorted breathing. The lights dimmed. Every monitor in the studio blinked to life, displaying the same thing, a grainy live feed from the old transmitter field. For a moment, she saw Ethan, barely visible in the fog, looking straight into the camera. Then, right behind him, something moved. Back in the woods, Ethan stirred awake in mud and darkness. His clothes were soaked, his hands cut from where he'd fallen. The transmitter's faint blue glow pulsed nearby, but it was quieter now, the static almost gentle. He tried to stand, but dizziness overtook him. His earpiece still crackled softly, Marla's voice echoing from miles away. He could hear her calling his name. He pressed the mic to his lips. "Marla, I'm here." "Don't." The signal fractured. The air around him shimmered, a ripple like heat haze. And from the trees came voices, his voice, her voice, and dozens more, whispering in perfect synchronization. He turned, every muscle trembling. The dark figures were closer now, surrounding the clearing, whispering through the sound of rain. Marla sat in the old studio, the glow of the monitors painting her face in shifting hues of static. The feed from the woods kept cutting in and out, but one image repeated. A silhouette standing by the tower, hand raised as if reaching for her. She wanted to believe it was Ethan, but each time the picture flickered, the figure looked less human. The limbs too long, the stance too still. The faint hum that filled the room deepened, vibrating through the floorboards. She tried to power the system down, but the switches resisted. The signal had taken control of the board itself. Every channel flickered to the same frequency, 104.7 megahertz, their own broadcast. Whatever was transmitting from the woods was inside their network now. She opened the cabinet beneath the console, searching for the manual shutoff circuit. Instead, she found something she didn't expect, a small, dust-covered box labeled Field Relay Archive 1968. Inside were reel tapes, handwritten logs, and a faded incident report. She squinted at the yellowed paper. WZRD Field Team Number 3. Contact lost, October 31st, 1968. Her breath caught. The details matched the coordinates of the very transmitter Ethan had found in the woods. The report mentioned a failed broadcast experiment, an attempt to transmit a low-frequency signal using environmental feedback or sound waves drawn directly from natural resonance, wind, trees, even human biofrequency. Testing yielded audio interference resembling human voices, the report read. All 3 operators disappeared within 24 hours. Marla dropped the folder, her pulse hammering. The static on the speakers shifted, subtle at first, then unmistakable. The voices she'd just read about were speaking again, clearer now, layered through her own frequency. She leaned in close, her fear overridden by fascination. The whispers said her name. Then one phrase, repeating, "The air remembers." Goosebumps rose along her arms. She turned toward the glass window of the control booth and froze. Outside, through the studio glass, stood a figure. Soaked clothes, mud-covered face. It looked like Ethan, but his eyes, blank, reflecting only the monitor light, stared right through her. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Ethan stumbled toward the old tower again. He could still hear Marla faintly, her voice fractured through the radio. "Ethan, you're here and not here," it said. He didn't understand. The transmitter pulsed brighter now, the static building into a droning hum that felt like it was shaking the ground. Around the clearing, the ghostly figures were closer, circling him slowly. Their whispers overlapped, familiar, pleading, desperate. He realized with dawning horror that they weren't spirits in the traditional sense. They were echoes, fragments of the lost broadcast, looping endlessly through the frequency, feeding on any new signal strong enough to reach them. And by broadcasting his voice, he had given them exactly that. Ethan dropped to his knees, clutching the radio. "Marla, shut it down. Don't let them." His voice distorted mid-sentence, dissolving into pure static. The air around him shimmered again, the same heat-like wave rippling through the clearing. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Then, in the distance, he heard it, the faint sound of his own broadcast playing back through the forest, his voice calling out from the speakers of the very station he'd left hours ago. It shouldn't have been possible. He looked up toward the trees, and among the dark shapes moving there, one broke away. It looked exactly like him. The studio felt wrong now, like the air itself was vibrating. Marla pressed her palms against the console, staring at the waveform pulsing on the main monitor. It wasn't random static anymore. The shape of it almost looked like a heartbeat. Ethan's voice drifted through the speakers again, distorted, fragmented, like a recording caught between worlds. "Marla, you have to shut it down. The signal's alive." Her breath caught. "Ethan, I can't hear you. Where are you?" She whispered into the mic. For a moment, nothing. Then a low hum filled the room, followed by a reply that made her blood run cold. "I'm here. Behind you." She spun around, flashlight shaking in her hand. No one. Just the shadow of the booth reflected in the glass. But something moved in that reflection, something that shouldn't have. It looked like Ethan, but his movements were seconds out of sync with hers, like a lagging mirror image. His mouth moved, forming words she couldn't hear. She stared at the reflection, trembling. Then the lights dimmed, and the reflection smiled. The broadcast board surged with noise as if something enormous had just taken over the frequency. Marla lunged forward, slamming switches, trying to kill the signal. Sparks jumped from the board. The reflection vanished, leaving only her pale, terrified face in the glass. Out in the woods, Ethan was running. The glow of the transmitter pulsed behind him like a heartbeat, each flash illuminating the shadowed figures that followed. They didn't chase him with movement. They simply appeared, closer every time he blinked. Their whispers filled his head, each one sounding like his own voice. He stumbled over a root, crashing into the mud. His radio skittered away, its red light blinking weakly. "Marla," he gasped, crawling toward it. "If you can hear me, cut the main power. It's feeding off the station, off us." The radio crackled, but what came back wasn't her. It was him. "I told you not to answer." Ethan froze. His voice, the one from before. From the call that started it all. "You shouldn't have come outside." Marla sprinted down the hall toward the generator room. Every fluorescent light flickered violently as she passed, buzzing like angry bees. The static followed her, seeping from speakers, walls, even the vents. She kicked open the door and grabbed the main breaker lever. The hum of the building roared in her ears. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she whispered and pulled it down. Instantly, the lights died, plunging the station into total darkness. The hum cut off. The air stilled. For the first time all night, there was silence. But then, from somewhere deep in the building, a faint transmission began again, low and distant. "Marla, you did it." Relief washed over her, until she realized the voice hadn't come from her radio. It had come from the dark corner of the room. In the woods, Ethan collapsed as the transmitter finally dimmed. The figures stopped moving, their forms flickering like candlelight before fading into mist. The air cleared. The rain returned. He stared at the silent tower, breathing hard, mud streaking his face. He reached for his radio again. "Marla." Static. "Marla, come in." Nothing. Only faint whispers echoing his own name. He pushed himself up, shivering. Somewhere in the distance, far beyond the trees, he could see the faint red glow of the station's on-air sign, still lit, even though the power should have been gone. Marla stood in the dark, her back pressed to the cold wall of the generator room. The silence after the blackout was deafening, so complete that even her own breathing sounded foreign. The red, on-air light shouldn't have been visible, but it glowed faintly through the hallway window, pulsing like a heartbeat. She forced herself to move toward it, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. As she passed Studio B, the door creaked open on its own. Inside, the control board had come alive again, faint lights flickering across its surface though the power was still off. The monitors displayed no signal, only rolling static that shimmered with unnatural light. Then the speakers crackled. Ethan's voice emerged, clear, calm, almost rehearsed. "Good evening, night owls. You're tuned into Whispers After Dark. Tonight's story is about two hosts who thought they could turn off the signal. But the signal never turns off." Her heart stopped. That was Ethan's old introduction. His voice exactly, every inflection right, but he wasn't saying it now. The broadcast was repeating itself, live, with tiny distortions that twisted his tone into something colder. She stepped closer to the mic, trembling. "Ethan, if that's you, answer me." A long pause. Then, faintly, through layers of interference, "Marla, I'm trying. Don't listen to it. It's not me." Static howled through the speakers. On the waveform monitor, she saw a shape, two overlapping frequencies pulsing together, one hers, one his, both trying to drown each other out. "It's copying us," she whispered. "It's been copying us from the start." Out in the forest, Ethan trudged toward the distant glow of the station. His radio flickered back to life intermittently, voices whispering his name like echoes caught between trees. He ignored them, focusing on the faint red pulse ahead. The rain had stopped. The air was still. When he finally reached the gravel lot, he saw that the building's windows were illuminated again. The on-air light burned bright, though the rest of the town below was dark. He took one cautious step forward and heard his own voice from inside, delivering the same line he'd just heard Marla react to. Tonight's story is about two hosts. He froze. Something was broadcasting him before he even spoke. Inside, Marla moved to the control room window and saw a figure crossing the parking lot. Relief flooded her. Ethan. He was alive. She reached for the door handle, but stopped. The on-air light flickered 3 times, then steadied. Through the glass, she saw Ethan raise his hand in greeting. And then she saw another Ethan standing behind him, barely visible in the fog, mirroring every movement a heartbeat too late. The figure in the rear tilted its head, exactly as the reflection had done hours before. Marla backed away from the door, realization dawning. The broadcast wasn't repeating the past. It was projecting it. Everything they'd said, every sound they'd made had been captured and replayed until the signal learned how to rebuild them. The frequency had found a way to make its own hosts. Ethan approached the door, knocking softly. "Marla, it's me. Open up." His voice sounded right, but slightly delayed, like a recording played through static. Inside, the equipment sparked, dials turning on their own. The mic light glowed red again, and from the speakers came a second voice, almost overlapping the first. "Marla, it's me. Open up." One voice live, the other a perfect echo. The two blended into one distorted harmony. She clamped her hands over her ears, shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "Not again." Then, just before she reached the main switch, she heard a whisper, not through the speakers, but right beside her ear. "If you end the broadcast, we end too." She turned toward the sound. The reflection in the glass was smiling again. The sound in the studio shifted again, a deep, pulsing thrum that felt more alive than mechanical. Marla stood frozen before the glass, staring at the 2 Ethans in the parking lot. The one closest to the door banged against the glass, shouting something she couldn't hear. The other, the one behind, didn't move at all. Its head slowly turned toward the studio window, and even through the fog she saw the faint, unnatural gleam of its eyes reflecting the on-air light. She backed away, clutching the microphone stand like a weapon. Every speaker in the room began humming, picking up an identical rhythm. For the first time, Marla understood. The signal wasn't just feeding off them. It was trying to replace them. The hum grew louder. Screens flashed unreadable data. She turned toward the breaker again, ready to rip out every wire by hand if she had to. Then, faintly, she heard Ethan's real voice, muffled, desperate. "Marla, please. It's not me out here. Don't open the door." She froze. Through the static, his voice was breaking, distorted by distance and fear. She looked back through the window. Both figures were gone. The parking lot was empty. The on-air light flickered once, then steadied again. Slowly, the main studio speakers came to life. The voice that spoke next wasn't Ethan's, but it used his tone perfectly. Broadcast restored, it said, "Welcome back, listeners." Ethan burst through the back entrance moments later, covered in mud and rain, panting as if he'd been running for hours. "Marla," he shouted, stumbling into the control room. She spun toward him, relief and terror warring in her eyes. "Don't move," she said. "Tell me something only you'd know." He blinked, confused. "What?" "The story you told your first night on air," she pressed. His voice cracked. "The man in the cornfield." He vanished into his own echo. Marla's hands shook. That was right, but the way he said it, flat and mechanical, wasn't. Before she could react, every monitor in the room flashed bright white. The speakers erupted with a single, sharp tone, high-pitched, piercing, almost like a scream. Ethan's face blurred in the strobing light. His voice layered over itself, repeating endlessly, "You can't turn it off." Marla lunged toward the board, yanking the cables free, one after another. Sparks exploded around her. The room filled with smoke. She didn't stop until the last light died. Then, silence. The static was gone. The hum was gone. The air felt dead. Slowly, she sank to the floor, breathing hard in the darkness. For the first time all night, there was nothing. She whispered to herself, "It's over." And for a long, fragile moment, it was that at dawn, emergency crews found the station half-burned. The tower collapsed. The official report blamed an electrical overload during the storm. They never found Ethan. Marla was discovered unconscious but alive, her hands still clutching the mic. Later, when she was released from the hospital, she walked past a pawn shop and froze. In the window sat an old radio, its dial cracked but still glowing faintly. It was tuned to 104.7 FM. She leaned closer, heart pounding. The faint hiss of static turned into a voice, calm, familiar, and smiling. "Good evening, night owls," it said. "You're tuned into Whispers After Dark. Tonight's story is about you."